Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. We are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, all you porcupines, you. This is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the New Hampshire Free State Project, Eric Brakey, coming to you for episode 80 of the Porcupine Report. Thank you so much for joining me today. Of course, as always, we endeavor to bring you a new episode every single Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m., which you can find on so many Free State Project platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you like to consume this content. We are there for you. And as appropriate, it helps the show so much if you leave a nice comment, you share it with a friend, whatever makes sense for the platform that you're on. I don't know. Spotify, can you leave a review? I don't know. I don't know how it works differently, different places. However you are coming to us today, I'm so glad to have you for what's going to be another great episode. First, before we get into our conversation with our guest today, a few things to cover at the top of the show, like I always like to do. And first up to bat, I want to tell you about my friends at Porcupine Coffee Roasting. You know, I have found the older I get, I just don't have the vim and energy that I had in my 20s. And how do I keep fighting for liberty every single day? Well, with a great cup of coffee. And I'm really glad and I really enjoy lately, since I got a subscription with Porcupine Coffee Roasting, that I get this delivered right to my door, freshly ground specialty beans, and it's wonderful. Keeps me caffeinated. And this isn't just coffee, it's a revolution in your mug. It's proudly operated by Free Staters in the Free State. Only specialty grade beans roasted from small producers, always fresh, in small batches to order, with a roast date you can trust. There are no stale beans from these guys. Porcupine Coffee is all about sovereignty. It's a private membership association that embodies the live free or die ethic, giving freedom-minded folks like you a way to choose liberty with every sip. And here is the deal that we have going on. If you use code PORKREPORT at porcupinecoffeeroasting.com, you can get 15% off your order of individual products. And a portion of your purchase goes back to support the show. So that's a win-win-win for everyone. A win for Porcupine Coffee Roasters. They're getting a great new customer. A win for the show. We're getting some support to keep us going. And a win, of course, most importantly, for you, because you're getting amazing coffee delivered right to your door. So use code PORKREPORT for 15% off at porcupinecoffeeroasting.com. Live free, drink free, and stay caffeinated, my friends. All right. Now that I've got my coffee fix, events. We got a lot of events coming up. And I keep telling you about these, and tickets are selling out for some of these items. In just 11 days, we are having our very first, what I hope to be an annual event. Anyway, it is the first annual Granite Freedom Trek. We're doing a 5-mile hike of some mountains here in New Hampshire, led by a professional guide and a native Free Stater, Derek Prue. And it's going to be a great opportunity to come out, see the beautiful New Hampshire wilderness and our mountains. Just as autumn is upon us, the leaves are beginning to change. It'll be a wonderful time all around. With your ticket, you get a complimentary t-shirt, a drink ticket at the celebration we're going to have at the end. And we're about 75% sold out on this event. So go to fsp.org/trek and get your ticket while supplies last. There aren't too many more. So if you want to come on out, act quickly. So that's 11 days from now, Sunday, September 21st. And of course, we are in fall. Autumn is upon us, and we've got a lot of autumn events coming up, including, you want to mark your calendars for Columbus Day weekend. We have a whole host of events with Fall Fest, which is being put on by our friends at Independence Realty Group, a variety of family-friendly events scattered around the Free State opportunities to go out with your family and friends to do a corn maze, apple picking, axe throwing, an arcade day at the largest arcade in the world, family hikes, so many great events happening at Fall Fest. It's fun for the whole family. So on that long Columbus Day weekend, make sure to mark your calendar and go to fsp.org/fallfest. And you're going to want to email Constance Spencer to RSVP and let her know which events we can plan to see you at. So it's a great one for the family. Bring your family out. And while you're here on Columbus Day weekend for Fall Fest, those are going on all 3 days. And on one specific day, right in the middle of Columbus Day weekend, we have a very special event for those who are into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I'll be speaking at this event along with many other great speakers. I think people who may be even far more qualified than me to speak on these topics. And that will be the Free State Bitcoin Digital Assets Conference hosted by our friends Bruce and Carol Ann Fenton. It's going to be in Newcastle, New Hampshire. Go to blockchainnh.com, get your ticket. Actually, there's on the graphic there, we say that there's a discount code for 50% off. That's an error now, actually, because they decided, you know what, to just open it up. Tickets are free. So, but they're invested. This is going to be a really classy event just because it's free. Do not undervalue the value of attending and getting a ticket for this. The Fentons are funding this event. It's going to be at a very nice hotel, and it's great value. So if Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, digital assets, if those are your jam, then you're going to want to join us for the Free State Bitcoin Digital Assets Conference. So get your ticket and RSVP. And in the news, I want to highlight some recent events that are going on. If you are not aware, the city of Manchester is contesting your right to pickle. Believe it or not. There is, if you received our recent newsletter, you would know all about this. And you should be signed up for my weekly newsletter, which you can sign up for at fsp.org/go. You can sign up for it on any, like the front page of fsp.org, but fsp.org/go will take you right to a page where you just sign up nice and easy for the newsletter. And you'll want to get this every single week because we covered in this newsletter this much ado about pickles happening in Manchester, where, a man simply who has been a long time, he grows extra vegetables in his garden, and he pickles them and he hands them out. He makes them available to family and friends. He posts on social media, hey, I've got extra pickles for anyone who wants them. And one person had the audacity to say, I am so thankful. This is so wonderful. I'm going to throw some money your way. Well, that was enough for the City of Manchester Health Department to send a cease and desist letter to this man, telling him he must not give away his pickles to people anymore because, after all, he's not a licensed food vendor. He doesn't have a commercial kitchen. Heaven forbid. Well, he is fighting back, and it's led to a lot of people in Manchester to stand up and fight back for their right to pickle. In fact, there was a recent pickle protest where people were exercising their civil disobedience at Manchester City Hall as the aldermen were meeting to discuss the issue. I'm told that I can neither confirm nor deny, but there's a rumor that many homemade pickles were shared amongst folks there. I mean, I would never out them. They were technically violating the law, believe it or not. But you know what? It is very interesting. I was reading some stories about this from different sources, and there was an NHPR story that also covered a case of a woman who had a bakery in her home in Manchester that was shut down just 6 months earlier. So he's not the only person who is being subject to this. But of course, in her case, she was running a business, whereas this man who was giving away pickles wasn't really running a business. He was just doing this as a community service for friends and family. And he got shut down all the same. And it makes you wonder, if you don't have the freedom to pickle, what will they come for next? Are lemonade stands? Are they going to be shaking down your kids, asking them for their papers and their permit to sell lemonade on the corner? Are they going to be coming for our potluck dinners? I mean, heaven forbid. We all know that not everything that appears at a potluck dinner was prepared in a commercial kitchen. where does it end? So thank you to all the free staters who have been actively fighting for the right to pickle. Some might say, don't you have bigger things to worry about than just the right to pickle? Well, in the free state, we do not abide even the small tyrannies. So we are always ready to stand up and fight for freedom, including for the freedom to pickle. So come and take it. I do want to mention to you as well, we have been doing through the Free State Project, we have launched our outreach team, and we are doing a lot of outreach events, particularly around New England. I mentioned this to you in a previous episode. We went to Maine for the Augusta Gun Show. Well, this past weekend, we went down south to Rhode Island for the Rhode Island Militaria Show. And we spoke with a lot of folks in Rhode Island. Boy, I'll tell you, people in Maine are chafing under the tyranny of their state. But in Rhode Island, it's extra bad. And people there know it. We got new email signups, people who are going to be, we're going to be in contact with, inviting them to our events taking place here in New Hampshire. And we heard from more than a couple people who are actively considering making the move to New Hampshire. And we gave them a little bit of extra reason and information to help them make their choice. We certainly would welcome all who yearn to breathe free in the live free or die state. And so that was this last weekend. We are now this weekend, we are going again out. We're going back to Maine. We're going to some of the most northern corners of Maine, to Holton, Maine, in Aroostook County for the Holton Gun Show. We're going to be tabling there and meeting with more folks. And I do want to say to you, these outreach events don't cost a lot of money, but they do cost a little money, particularly when we're going to a place like Holton, where it's like a 5-hour drive, right? It's far enough away that it doesn't make sense to drive back, and it's a 2-day event. So, we're covering lodging and meals for our volunteers, and our patrons, our Porcupine patrons, make that all possible. So I want to say thank you to our 200 plus Porcupine patrons who've been supporting efforts like these in our year-round mission to bring more libertarians and liberty lovers to the live free or die state. These outreach events are a great opportunity for that, and it's powered by our patrons. So thank you to our patrons. And if you would like to be a Porcupine patron, please go to fsp.org/give, and you can sign up there. For $10 a month or $100 a year, you get to be a Porcupine patron. You get a Porcupine patron pin that gives you exclusive perks at FSP events. Plus, it's a really nice, cool status symbol. You get to walk around the Free State community, and everyone knows you are someone who is going the extra mile to support the cause. And there's other perks that come with being a Porcupine patron as well. You get to, if you'd like, you can be in our exclusive Porcupine patron signal group. You get a print quarterly newsletter right in the mail, the real snail mail, direct from me every 3 months. And a whole other perks is you kind of scale up to different levels. So you can learn more at fsp.org/give. And thank you to all of our patrons who are supporting our ability to do outreach events and bring more liberty lovers to New Hampshire. All right. I think those are the things I wanted to hit. Let's get to the interview. All right. I am excited to have on the show for the first time. But this is someone who I got to know pretty early on after making the move to New Hampshire, or even early in the process of making the move to New Hampshire. She's a real mover and shaker. I think she's a native Granite Stater. But, we're doing this thing lately where we're trying to open it up. For the longest time, people have just said, oh, Free Staters are people who moved here. I think a Free Stater is anyone who lives in New Hampshire who believes in a free New Hampshire. So, I want to count our native Free Staters, as Free Staters too. So I would say she's a Free Stater. We'll have to ask her if she accepts that title or not. But either way, she is someone who is working for freedom in the state of New Hampshire. She is the Deputy State Director of Americans for Prosperity, New Hampshire. Her name is Sarah Scott, and let's welcome her to the show.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for coming on. I know there have been a few times we've been trying to coordinate schedules to get you on with so many policy victories in the legislature to brag about this year. So
it's been a busy year legislatively, which is a good thing for us here. I know there are a lot of other states in which you say it's a busy year, and that's not a good thing at all. But we've got a lot of really exciting wins going on here.
They say that Mark Twain said, no man's life, liberty, or property is safe while the legislature's in session. And I think that that's true in most states, but in New Hampshire, it's like no statist authoritarian program is safe while the legislature's in session. It's a much better place to be.
It really is. It's a lot of fun. If you like me, you're kind of a nerd about this stuff. I love watching the legislature here. It's so entertaining. You kind of like tune into another state and you're reminded of just what it looks like across the rest of the country. Because like you said, I am from New Hampshire. So for me, this is normal.
Yeah. Well, it is very abnormal for me coming from Maine, where I've enjoyed giving a lot of passionate speeches about liberty and moving the needle here or there, but overall it was depressing to watch freedom continually just slip away, whereas in New Hampshire, it's going the other direction. And I will say I really appreciate Sarah. I know there have been a couple of times that Americans for Prosperity over the course of the year has put out certain press releases on certain policy victories and has specifically acknowledged the role that many people in the Free State movement have played in the activism and the legislation in order to make some of these victories happen. So I just want to say personally, I really appreciate the acknowledgement and AFP New Hampshire. It's not a conspiracy theory, right? You know, some of our haters like Jeannie Deach and others are like, there's this conspiracy of like these organizations that like have similar, visions for the state of more freedom, and it's like some conspiracy that we know each other and we like each other, right? It's like, well, it's not a conspiracy. I love what AFP is doing, and I appreciate that you guys like what we are doing. And hopefully we can bring in more great activists and keep funneling them towards groups like AFP and the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance and others. But could you, I guess, broad overview before we get into kind of some of the specifics on different policy fights and wins this year? Would you like to tell folks a little bit about Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire? And personally, I love that. I feel like the AFP chapter of New Hampshire is, I have friends in AFP chapters all around the country doing great work, and many of them are libertarians, but I feel like there's an especially strong libertarian bent in New Hampshire, which I appreciate. Would you like to tell folks about
AFP?
Yeah,
absolutely. So Americans for Prosperity is a nonprofit, nonpartisan grassroots advocacy organization. Like you said, we're a very libertarian-friendly organization. And when I first got involved with Americans for Prosperity, it was now over 11 years ago. And I, to be honest, had no idea what I was joining. I was really interested in making a difference in New Hampshire, and I had no idea what that looked like. I was young in college. I thought maybe like run a campaign or something, but I just knew I wanted to get involved. Had no idea how. I'd never heard of the Free State Project before. So I was just kind of like around, showing up at events and seeing what was going on. And I found out about this group. And I was like, oh, somebody is getting involved in issues like they want things like lower taxes. They want to cut spending. They want greater education freedom. Like, that sounds nice. Don't know what it is, but like, I should be a part of this. And I got involved. And since getting involved, it's obviously been over 11 years. So I never left. I found out that it was this group that not only were they taking positions on issues and saying, we support lower taxes, but it's the group that was actually going out there and making a difference. So I got to join and now do every day the kind of things that I would be doing in my free time. So I get to feel like I'm actually making an impact. We work on a whole host of different legislative issues. So anywhere from healthcare, energy, education, taxes. We work on all these different issues specifically at the state level. We do get involved at the national level too, but a lot of my day-to-day work is really focused here in New Hampshire, which is what I'm passionate about. Growing up here, I took a lot of this stuff for granted. So I'm very familiar with that low tax attitude, and going and seeing what's happening in other states has really made me appreciate what we have here in New Hampshire. And I've wanted to, since then, just dedicate my life towards protecting that freedom, and not just for me, but for other people too. I really see myself as very lucky to have grown up here, and I want to make sure that that is protected for people that are moving to the state or the people that are also growing up here, so they have that same environment to grow up in that I did. So Americans for Prosperity is the group that is getting involved in protecting these things, and then going out there and pushing to expand it too. We also see ourselves as really a resource for legislators. So in New Hampshire, I like to tell people, because they're not always familiar with our legislature, we have 400 state reps here. It's a lot of people. They only make $100 a year, so it's very much a volunteer position, and they don't have any staff. So when they're asked to vote on over 1,000 bills over the course of the year, they don't have the time or expertise in all of these areas to go out and figure out exactly what 1,000 different bills mean. So I like to be there as a resource to help them understand what it is these bills actually do and how this impacts the state, to kind of just be there as a helping hand and support for them also.
All right. And I think it's certainly worth noting there are plenty of organizations out there that can put out a press release on an issue or even show up to speak at a public hearing. And that's all well and good. But right, it's as you say, it's getting the people on the ground to actually mobilize voters and to let their politicians know who supposedly represent them what they'd like to see. And AFP really is a powerhouse there in New Hampshire. So let's go through some of these policy wins over the course of the last year. I know we kind of opened the year. This was really a policy win from last year, but we just, I guess the freedom movement just had to not lose the elections to not have this wiped out, because Democrats were certainly itching to repeal it before it went into effect, which was the full phase out of the interest and dividends tax, and which is kind of the last remnants of anything resembling a personal income tax in the state of New Hampshire. Big win there. Anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I brought up before, taxes are a huge issue to me. Having grown up in a state where we talk all the time about not having a sales tax and not having an income tax, I was pretty surprised when I learned that we actually do have an income tax, or we did. So the interest and dividends tax was a form of an income tax. And we started working on that issue probably, I would say about 5 years ago, and looking at how can we truly be an income tax-free state. And so we made improvements in the legislature to make way for a phase out of that. We started the phase out process, and then we were able to even expedite that phase out. And as of December 31st of this past year, we no longer have any tax on interest and dividends. So we're truly a no income tax state, which I think is a huge win for us. We're really proud to be able to say that and truly mean it now. We don't have any other taxes on people's income. So it's a really exciting thing for us to be able to talk about and brag to other states. They should follow along and do this also. But it was a fun win. We had a funeral for the interest and dividends tax up in Concord right before the end of it, which was a fun thing to do. And you're right that the Democrats did try to bring this back already. Thankfully, we have a lot of strong Liberty legislators up in Concord this year, but there was a bill, and they were sneaky about it this year too. They actually put in a bill to raise almost every tax we have and to reinstate the interest and dividends tax. So not a fun bill at all. And they made it was very creative with the title. It doesn't sound like you're raising taxes at all. But this bill was going to go and raise things like the business taxes, raise the rooms and meals tax, and bring back the interest and dividends tax. It would have been horrible for the state. It was so bad even that when the bill sponsor went to introduce this legislation, he was afraid to say what it was. And they had to stop him several times and say, tell us what your bill does. And he couldn't do it. They ended up stopping him 3 times throughout this. And he was too afraid to say, I'm going to bring back the interest and dividends tax.
It was so funny to me to watch during the campaign season last year. I think it was a Democrat gubernatorial candidate. Very forgettable person. I've already forgotten her name, but I remember just seeing an ad for her. She's like, I won't, something along the lines of like, they're saying I support an income tax. I will protect no income tax, but we are going to bring back the interest and dividends tax. It's like, well, isn't that an income tax? Seems like they try to talk out of both sides of their mouth and just play on the ignorance of people. To hope that obviously it didn't work for her. So that was great. So that was kind of a victory that was kind of, baked in last year, but then with the strong majorities, including a growing Liberty coalition in the House and Senate, a whole other host of policies. I know you and I were talking beforehand. Just want to list some of these out, and we can kind of tackle some of them one by one. We have huge leaps forward for school choice and education freedom with education freedom accounts and some other education policies we can talk about. An expansion of right to try legislation for terminally ill patients. A repeal of the car inspection mandate, established a strategic Bitcoin reserve with some gold and silver added in. Housing was tackled in terms of lifting some of the zoning restrictions on housing development. It almost seems like so many things were tackled and accomplished. Like the only thing that didn't get done this year was right to work. So you're just kind of leaving some stuff to come back for later, apparently. But what would you like to dive into first?
I think let's dive into education first. In my mind, I think that was the biggest win we had this year. So I would love to start talking about that.
Go ahead.
All right. So education freedom accounts were first started in New Hampshire back in 2021. And education freedom accounts, if anybody's not familiar with what it is, some other states call this an education savings account, but we're New Hampshire, we got to be different. So it's an education freedom account. And what this is you're taking that state portion of education money and putting it directly in the hands of parents so that they can decide on the education that best fits their student. So this is an idea that's been around for a little while. Some other states like Florida passed it, Arizona passed it, New Hampshire implemented this in 2021. And at the time, we had one of the best programs in the country. So our program was open to anybody making up to 300% of the federal poverty line. And basically what we were doing is saying, here's that state portion of education funding. You go out and find the education that works best for your child. So it could be things like home education. So if you need to go out and buy textbooks, you can go buy that. If you want to go out and take classes, there are a lot of amazing homeschool co-ops in the state. And if you want to go and take a class there, you can use your education freedom account money to go pay for a class. Or it could be used for things like a private school. So if you're looking at, a private Catholic school, or you're looking at something like a more Montessori school, something like that, you can go out and use it for your tuition there. Essentially, New Hampshire gives a lot of freedom for parents to go out and say, your child best, go out and use this money on the education opportunity you feel like is best for them. So we passed this program and it was great. The downside of it was that it wasn't open to every child in the state. It was only open to those in a certain income bracket. And so a lot of us have been working on this issue since then to say, this isn't a welfare program. We're not handing you money because we think that you don't make enough. This is more focused on the fact that we don't think government should be the one determining what's best for your child. At the end of the day, parents should be making that decision. And so we want to put that education money in the hands of parents so that they can go out and pick what's better. So we started working on this issue and we've made a little bit of progress over the last couple of years. And then this year, we actually got it all the way across. So we were able to expand the program to every child in the state. So no matter where you live or what your income is in the state, you now have that choice of education freedom, which was a huge victory. This puts us at one of the top programs in the country in terms of education freedom. I would make the argument that this puts New Hampshire at number one for education freedom. I'm sure somebody's going to come out from another state and want to debate it. Happy to have that argument. But I really do believe that New Hampshire has one of the best programs here. We really have focused a lot on putting these decisions in parents' hands rather than bureaucrats. So I'm really excited with that win here this year. And I'll say it's all thanks to a lot of these phenomenal liberty legislators that we have.
Well, let me ask you, because I certainly think this was one of the great policy victories to celebrate. And I'm sure it'll be very attractive to many Liberty families who, want to be in a state where they have control over their child's education. Obviously, there are critics of this from kind of the statist left, and we understand all of that. They worship their government schools and they want every kid locked into them without parents having any say whatsoever in the education of their kids. So I understand where they're coming from. We don't need to dwell too much on them, but I do want to be fair, and I know that there are some folks kind of on the liberty side who look at this and say, well, aren't you taking government money and you're giving it to private schools? Will that isn't that a new they say, isn't that a new welfare program, or isn't that could this kind of create a situation where these private institutions are beholden to the state curriculum requirements and stuff like that? Personally, I will say, before it does seem to me like every family is already there's a pre-existing entitlement, which is the public education, and we're just talking about taking a piece of that and freeing up the dollars so that families have more control over it. So I don't see it as like a new welfare program. I see it as giving people more control over something that already exists. But Sarah, what do you have to say to some of those critics who may be coming from more of a liberty perspective in their critique?
I think you were spot on with what you said. We're not adding to the education spending. We're not saying we're going to spend an extra, $5,000-$6,000 per student that's coming out of nowhere. This is already the law here. We already have to fund education. The state is already required to pay for any child in New Hampshire to go to a traditional public school. So we're not adding to that. If anything, I see this as really a taxpayer savings. So the way education funding works is there's a part of it that comes from the state. There's a part of it, a little bit of it, that comes from the federal government. And then there's a big chunk of it that comes from the local towns, the local district. So in other states, that number is maybe a little bit more balanced or maybe a little bit heavier on the state side. But in New Hampshire, a lot of our education funding is actually at the local level. So when we're talking about an education freedom account, we're only talking about that state portion of money, which is the minority of the money. So we're looking at like child A. Instead of child A costing over $20,000 for a year of education, we're only looking at $5,000 or $6,000. So from my perspective, we've just saved taxpayers $15,000 on that student. So I see this as a way to kind of, one, save money, but two, we're really reshaping what education is all about here. I think for too long, people have just seen education as that building that's down the road. It's like the local school that I'm assigned to go to. And they don't have any thought in their mind that they actually get to pick that there might be a different opportunity for their kids. Everybody's always thought this way in terms of, you look at college. Everybody knows that you get to go and you figure out what's the best fit for you. What is it you want to do? Do you know where you want to go in your life in terms of a career? Maybe there's, an opportunity that's better in a different part of the country. We understand that, and that seems natural to us, but the same thing isn't true when it comes to K-12 education. So I think this gets us closer to opening up people's minds and reminding them that they should be the ones making these decisions because they're closest to it, and it's their kids at the end of the day. So I think this really gets us closer to that ultimate vision of what education is all about.
Awesome. Well, and it's amazing to be a part of this amazing experiment in school choice and education freedom, and to watch this kind of emerging marketplace for education starting to grow now that families have purchasing power to be able to shop around. And supply is being developed to meet demand. And I know that a lot of folks in the Free State communities are building homeschooling co-ops and learning resource centers, and it's amazing to see kind of this opportunity to empower regular people to take control of their child's education and to build parallel institutions to be alternatives to the state. So I'm sure we're going to watch that experiment continue to unfold over next many years. There were a number of policy accomplishments around healthcare. There was the right to try expansion, and you'd also mentioned to me removing some remnants of certificate of need laws around critical access hospitals. Could you tell us about both of those policies?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the one that I think a lot of people find more boring, but I think is going to have a bigger impact on the state overall. So I talked to you a little bit about this before. It's not gotten a lot of publicity, and I think it's because, for the most part, people don't understand the impact of it. So New Hampshire, before this year, had a 15-mile moratorium around a critical access hospital. And what that means is if you were within 15 miles of a hospital that federally designated as a critical access hospital, you can't build. So if you want to build an urgent care, you can't build that. If you want to build an imaging center, you can't build that. If you want to build a birth center, you can't build that. This is basically a monopoly on healthcare in these areas. And so if you look at a map of New Hampshire, pretty much the vast majority of the upper part of the state is covered by these critical access hospitals. So if you look north of the Lakes region, you won't find urgent cares. So for folks that are going up to Porkfest, you're going to have to head over to Vermont if you want to go to an urgent care. One of the things I point out a lot is New Hampshire is a great state for like hiking. We have a lot of tourists that come up and go to the lakes in the summer. So if you trip and sprain your ankle, you're going to be going to the emergency room. Regardless of whether your injury actually warrants that or not, you're going to be sitting in the emergency room. And so that's leading to clogged up emergency rooms for patients that really don't need to be there. And so this law was still on the books saying that you can't build in this 15-mile radius. So we were actually able to get rid of this moratorium on around the critical access hospitals as part of the state budget this year, which was a huge win. It's something that, we've talked about and worked on for a number of years, but every year we've done it, we've come and hit some roadblocks. And so it wasn't necessarily something that I thought we were going to be able to get across the finish line, but we did. And I think we're going to see tremendous improvements over the next year. Pretty quickly, I think you're going to see things like an urgent care opening up. And so for the people that live in those areas, that's going to be huge. If you're looking at, for example, you live in northern New Hampshire and you're going to be giving birth, well, the labor and delivery wards in all of those hospitals have closed. So for a lot of folks up there, you're looking at either going to the emergency room to give birth, or you're looking at driving 2 hours south. And so for a lot of people, that makes the North Country just not an appealing place to live. And so I think you're going to see a lot of improvements with getting rid of this moratorium around the critical access hospitals. I'm really excited to see what comes of it, because I think that's something you're probably going to be fairly immediately able to see the impact of.
And for those who aren't familiar with these certificate of need laws, this has been, I feel like, a plague upon so many states in this country. And I know in Maine, we fought to try to, Maine has so many certificate of need laws. New Hampshire was already so ahead of Maine on this. But it reminds me how for so many policies that are in place, there is the stated public reason for the policy, and then there's the real reason for the policy. And the stated public reason for these certificate of need laws is, believe it or not, it's the idea that increased competition leads to higher prices, right? Which is the exact opposite of what everyone would know if they'd ever taken an economics 101 course. But that's kind of the economic ignorant justification for these certificate of need laws, that if you have more people providing healthcare, then prices are going to go up. It doesn't make any economic sense whatsoever. But of course, the real reason is there's entrenched special interests who benefit from kind of having a monopoly status and lack of competition, and they'll come up with whatever public justification they can to try to protect that. So it's nice to see that being rolled back, and some more competition in healthcare being available for people in New Hampshire, particularly in the northern regions. And I was also very excited, as someone who worked very hard on the Maine's right to try law, and I like to brag about, I wrote the right to try plank that's in the National Republican Party platform. It was very exciting to see New Hampshire had already had a right to try law, but there were some shortcomings in the kind of the basic right to try law that still had a lot of restrictions on people. And for those who don't know, of course, right to try is terminally ill patients, oftentimes with less than 6 months to live, who've exhausted all the FDA approved treatments, and there are investigational medicines, medical products, treatments that could save their life, maybe, but it hasn't completed the whole 10-year FDA approval process, which if you have 6 months to live, you might not have the time to wait around for that. So New Hampshire already had right to try, and we passed this expansion this year. Can you tell folks what that entails?
Yeah. So this is a really exciting win, because it now puts us at #1 in the country in terms of innovation and utilizing these right to try laws. So one of the issues with right to try historically has been that even though we're saying legally you're able to do this, there's a lot of fear around repercussions for doctors who do have an instance where they treat a patient who's terminally ill with some kind of experimental treatment. Their fear is not so much coming from the law as it is coming from a lawsuit. So we're saying that, yeah, you're allowed to do this, but they're still at risk for a family member to say, you gave my father this treatment and he died still. We're going to sue you for that. And so a lot of doctors, and really the insurance companies for doctors, had a lot of hesitancy around this and wanting to make sure that they were protected from liability in case of these kinds of lawsuits. So that's one of the things that this expansion did, is it gave protection for the doctors and the medical teams who are treating these patients to know that they are going to be safe. And patients are saying, like, we understand this is experimental. We're not holding you liable for this. Just do what you can. So one of the big impacts that I think you're going to see there is a lot of doctors who are like, great, I can finally do this. I've been wanting to. I want to treat people. I want to save their lives, but insurance companies are saying this is not a good idea. So one of the examples of this was a Free State Project activist, a former legislator, Michael Yakubovich. He's been battling a very aggressive cancer for, I think it's been about 4 years now. He was one of our top liberty legislators prior to this, and he's still very involved. And this was an issue that he came back and really took on a lot of the work here. Even though he's going through cancer treatments, he came in and testified and kind of shared what he's going through so that legislators can kind of help understand why it is we needed to make these changes. So one of the things he said is that in addition to the doctors not feeling safe enough to provide these other treatments, was that there is so much bureaucracy. So right now he will travel out of state to go to wherever has the newest trial. And he'll show up there and he'll find out, can he even be eligible for this treatment? So what New Hampshire does is say that first appointment where you're asking, like, do you treat what I have? Am I eligible for this experimental treatment? You can do that via telehealth, which is crazy to me that we didn't have this before and that other states don't have this. If you know you're only going to have 6 months left to live, you don't want to spend that 6 months flying across the country with just a hope of, like, maybe I show up here and they tell me I might qualify. So we're not even talking about getting the treatments out of state. We're just talking about finding out, am I eligible for the treatment? So that's going to be a really big change for a lot of families. And New Hampshire's law specifically focuses a lot on genetic illnesses. And so there are so many rare genetic diseases these days that are, maybe only 100 people across the country have. And so they're not developing a lot of these cures and treatments for them because it's just not something you can do at a mass scale. So New Hampshire's law is really focused on things like that. So we've had a lot of interest from families with children with rare genetic diseases. So kids that, are diagnosed when they're very young with something that's probably going to kill them by the time they're 10. This is going to really open up the door for treatments and experimental medications for a child like that. And I think New Hampshire is really well positioned for this versus some other states because we have Boston right here. And, Boston is world-class in terms of medical treatments. We have a lot of the best doctors in the world right here. And we have a lot of innovative things going on already. If you look at in Manchester, we're already doing a lot of regenerative medicines. And so I think opening the door and expanding that to kind of make New Hampshire this innovation hub is going to be a really great opportunity for us here. I know there are a lot of companies who are already looking at New Hampshire and how they can relocate here. The only other state that's passed any legislation similar to this is Montana. And I've heard from a number of people that are involved in this space that they say New Hampshire really is a better opportunity than Montana is. So I always like to be number one. And I think this is an area where we can definitely make that case and that argument that we are above and beyond everybody else.
Sometimes it is nice to be close to Boston, but separated by an invisible line where the laws are different. So
it is quite nice. And I think you'll see a lot of doctors who are in Boston right now and just jump across that border and open up another office in New Hampshire. So we don't even have to go into Boston.
Awesome. Well, that'll be really awesome to see how that unfolds. And that sounds like it's going to have a real impact on real people's lives. And, yeah, that's monumental and a model for the rest of the country. Car inspections. So car inspections, like the mandate on annual car inspections is gone. Tell us about this.
Yes. So prior to this year, we required a vehicle inspection every single year. Now, growing up here, I thought this was what everybody did because I had never known anything else. I learned very quickly from friends of mine that moved from out of state that this is not something that happens everywhere else, which was quite surprising to me when it's just all I had ever known. And so a number of people have worked on this issue for many years now, saying that, the reports are showing that vehicle inspections every year don't actually lead to safer cars. There are a whole bunch of families that are telling stories about, I can't get my kids to school anymore because I had a little bit of rust on my car and they say it failed the inspection and I can't afford a new car. There are a number of stories and examples that just show how ridiculous this law is that we would have to go get a vehicle inspection every year. So there was a great group of Liberty legislators who said, this is the year it's going to change. We've worked on this for a number of years already. We haven't made any progress. This is the year that we're done. And they made this their top issue. And I would say it was a really impressive grassroots effort by a number of activists in the Free State community. Very impressive grassroots display to get people on board with this. And it was the issue you could not stop hearing about. So when you talk to a legislator, they go, oh my gosh, my inbox is flooded. All I'm hearing about is this car inspection thing. Or you would see pictures on social media that they had gone out and flyered cars and everybody is like, I was here for like 10 minutes. How did you already flyer my car? Everybody knew about this. And the average Granite Stater was really excited to get rid of it. And so I think this was a really great opportunity to kind of bridge that gap and show, the normal person that's not paying attention to politics, here's what getting involved can do. It can really make a difference in your life. And we're showing them the real world results of that. So this was an issue that had we not had that hardcore group of Liberty legislators, we definitely would not have been able to make progress on it this year. So I give a ton of credit to those legislators and the activists who got involved in this fight. It was not an easy one. It's something that I think a lot of us fully expected to be an ongoing fight for many years, or, ending up with some kind of a compromise and say, well, let's just go to every 2 years. No, we were able to totally get rid of it altogether, which I think is really amazing. It's very exciting. I can't wait for my birthday next year where I don't have to go and get that car inspection done. I think a lot of people don't realize just how much this was essentially a money grab. We weren't seeing any results from safer cars. People are still going to get their cars looked at. Everybody still goes and gets an oil change. You're still going to know if your brakes go out. We're not going to see unsafe vehicles on the road. But we've stopped that kind of monopoly system of that annual vehicle inspection.
And I was very impressed with the targeting that the activists were doing you mentioned like putting flyers on cars. So I understand that they were specifically identifying cars with expired vehicle inspection stickers. Perfect target marketing.
Great audience. And it's amazing just how many people's inspections had expired. I don't think you realize that until you start going around and looking at cars, and there are a lot of them, including legislators. There were several legislators who maybe weren't even supportive of this bill who ended up with flyers on their car because they had expired inspection sticker.
Yeah. Well, I know in some of the arguments around this online, I would often see people say like, oh yeah, certainly there are other states that don't do this, but how many of them are states that get a lot of snow and we get rust? And I looked at, actually I had Grok do a cross reference for me, and maybe not around New England because, there's a particular kind of strain of progressive statism that runs through the state houses of all of New England, except for New Hampshire these days. But you go further out west to other northern states, and there are plenty of states that see tons of snow. They have salt on the roads. They don't have mandatory vehicle inspections, and they seem to do just fine. So it is kind of one of those things where I always felt like in the fight for constitutional carry in the old days, the opponents would have all of these horror stories of what would happen, but all you had to do was point at Vermont and say, like, this is what you're afraid of. So that's great. We did. I know our mutual friend, Representative Keith Ammon, led the charge on some important monetary policy issues. We now have a strategic Bitcoin reserve law in New Hampshire, which isn't just for Bitcoin, and that's what kind of gets the headlines, and it's kind of the sexy thing, right? 21st century cryptocurrency technology and all that, but also gold and silver, precious metals. Can now the state treasurer can hold up to, I believe, 5% of its reserves in gold, silver, or Bitcoin, or other cryptocurrencies that qualify according to certain thresholds and standards, which right now only includes Bitcoin. Anything you want to say about that new policy going into effect?
So once again, New Hampshire was #1 on this, which I think is always important to highlight. I think that this is a really great move to establish us as, we're the place to come if you want to be involved in the digital finance space, you want to get involved in cryptocurrency. I think this is an exciting move that kind of just shows the direction of the legislature. So are we going to see a lot of changes in your everyday life? Are you going to be able to see that this happened? Probably not. In my mind, what this does is this opens us up, though, as saying we're open for business as a state. We're friendly towards cryptocurrencies, which is something that a lot of other states are not doing. And a lot of these companies that are involved in either crypto or blockchain companies, they're looking for a home. They've found in a lot of states they're really not welcome there. Or if they are, there's just a lot of restriction and regulation, and there's just so much red tape they can't even figure it out because the laws just aren't even clear. And so I think this really sets New Hampshire apart as saying that, not only are we going to let you come here, we want you to come here. We're going to open ourselves up as being that innovation hub for everything. We've talked earlier about healthcare. I think that the same thing is true here. We want to be that beacon, that place for people to come and know that we want you to move your business here. We want you to experiment, and we think it's going to benefit the entire state here. You mentioned Representative Keith Ammon. He also had some other bills in this year dealing with blockchain companies. And I think we're going to continue to make progress on that over the next year also. But basically talking about blockchain and not saying we're going to change the laws, but basically just establishing that their rights are protected. So one of the big issues with a lot of crypto companies right now is the law is just murky. Yeah. It's not a yes or no. It's just kind of gray. And so one of the things that Representative Ammon is doing is kind of establishing here is what the law is. You are allowed to operate. We can't discriminate in New Hampshire against you just because you are a company that utilizes blockchain. So I think we're going to make good progress on that legislation over the next year and continue to push ourselves forward as that state that is welcome and opening. He also, to go along with that one, had a bill talking about the right to compute this year. And so right to compute sounds like a weird math thing. So much so that I showed up to testify on this bill, and the committee members were there early talking about what's going on with the bill. And they were like, I have no idea what this next bill is about. It says Keith Ammon here. It's probably like a Bitcoin bill. So the committee members had never heard of this either. So right to compute is talking about AI, essentially. So talking about protecting people's right to utilize AI to run an AI company, things like that. So it's not saying we're giving you extra rights, we're giving you extra protections. No, you have the same rights as everybody else, but you do have rights and those are protected. Just to, again, establish that New Hampshire wants to be open, welcoming, that innovative hub for everything. And so I think we're going to go and make some more progress on that this year. Also, a number of other states like Montana passed right to compute this past year. I think we're going to do it next year and have a better bill than they did. I know a lot of other states are also looking at this because everybody wants new business to come to their state. And so I think a lot of us are going to be working over the next year to say, how can we make New Hampshire an even better, more friendly state so that the businesses choose to move here? We want their business here rather than, Montana or any other state.
You say everyone wants new business to come to their state, but sometimes I doubt that. Maine's always my frame of reference because coming from there, as I was leaving Maine, through not even through lawmaking, just through regulatory reinterpretations of policy, suddenly all the cryptocurrency companies with people with accounts in Maine were coming forward and announcing, sorry, we've got to close down your account. We cannot do business with people in Maine anymore because of the overregulation by the state. It seems like there's this really ideologically driven You see this kind of from figures like Elizabeth Warren and folks, this ideologically driven antagonism towards cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and blockchain technologies, which has always struck me as ironic, especially considering kind of the energy pairing mix. I mean, you have an industry with kind of particularly like Bitcoin mining that is like a fully dispatchable industry. Like you can turn it on and off at the flip of a switch, which is like a perfect match for all these totally unreliable energy systems they want to create with wind and solar, right? You would think that this would be their savior, and yet they're fighting against it so hard. But the last thing you want, of course, if you're a business in the cryptocurrency space, is you don't want to be like those businesses in the gun manufacturing space who chose to set up shop in Massachusetts and decades later find out they're being actively persecuted by the government that they are residing under. So better to be in New Hampshire. And I know I did read a letter in one of the papers about a month or two ago that I think it was crypto.com is bringing some business to New Hampshire and creating some jobs here. So it's already putting up the crypto signal in the sky is already bringing some investment to the state and some job creation, which is exciting to see.
Yeah, we're definitely putting out the welcome banner for a lot of these businesses. And it's crazy to me just how much clarifying the law can make a difference in solidifying that this is an okay place for a business to move. We're not even changing the laws to give this kind of business more rights. So like in other states, they're saying, we're going to give you extra money if you move here in terms of like tax credits or tax breaks, or we're going to change it so the whole system benefits you. We're not even doing that. We're just saying, here is the law. You have rights just like any other company has rights and any other person has rights. And we're going to protect those rights here. And that just seems to be something that businesses in particular are craving because they don't want to be in a situation of uncertainty. They want to follow the law. They don't want to be getting sued later on and harassed and fined and everything like that when they find out that, hey, somebody decided in some bureaucracy that they actually don't like your business and we're going to shut it down.
Yeah. The arbitrary whims of people that nobody voted for with these bureaucrats. We're going to run a little long, if that's all right, because there's a few more things. Do you have the time to stick on for a little bit?
I've got time. Sure.
Okay, great. So there was also, and I know there's a lot of caterwauling about this, and even kind of divides many people in the kind of the liberty community with different opinions on this. But housing was a big issue in the legislature this year, and now I did not follow all the details of this, so you correct me if I kind of get anything wrong here. My understanding is that the legislature moved forward on relaxing certain zoning restrictions that are imposed on the local level on people's ability to develop their own property with accessory dwelling units and anyway, certain restrictions and minimum lot sizes and all of that. While also the complaint I saw from pro-housing people on the left was the legislature didn't put any taxpayer money in for subsidies for so-called affordable housing. So it seems like from what I saw, the overall thrust was trying to relax government restrictions to have kind of more free market housing development, market rate housing, that you bring more market rate housing onto the market, supply and demand, housing prices are going to come down. You don't need subsidies for that without falling into the leftist trap of we're going to do subsidized housing at taxpayer expense. Is that an accurate picture? And what more would you add to that?
Yeah, I think you definitely got the whole thing there. So when you talk about housing issues, if you do a poll in the state, housing is consistently the number one issue on people's minds. Everybody knows that housing is very expensive here. I'm sure that a lot of people listening are looking at moving to the state and saying, oh, but the housing prices are so high. It's a problem for sure. And ultimately, it's because of a number of different factors. One of the reasons is that local zoning boards are trying to prevent anybody from building anything new. They like how things were done way back many years ago, and they don't see any reason to change that. And so, unfortunately, what they're doing by that is not only can people not move into the town or into the state, we're having people that are from here that are leaving, unfortunately. So having been from here, a lot of my friends that I grew up with have left the state because they say it's too expensive. I can't buy a house here. So we're not just, I know a lot of people that are on the right kind of make the argument of, well, we don't want all these people from California coming in or New York.
I want some of the Californians and some of the New Yorkers, right? Very specific ones.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that can afford these high housing prices are the people from California and New York that we don't want. So all they've done with this system is they haven't kept anybody out. They're not saying, we're going to keep the lefties over there. They can afford to live here. What we're doing is we're getting rid of a lot of the, not even lower income, but like young professionals and families just can't afford to be here anymore. So I think that one of the big issues and like controversies here stems from how these things are being changed. And so a lot of people say, oh, you're making laws at the state level. Like, we don't want that. We want local control. And so I think to go for that, not to go on too long here, but you have to understand that New Hampshire is not a home rule state. And essentially what that means is that New Hampshire does not delegate authority to towns to do whatever they want. Towns can do what the state tells them they're allowed to do. And that's just how New Hampshire was set up initially. And I think a lot of times you hear that at first and you're like, oh, well, we want local control. Like, we want people in their communities to be able to decide what to do. But that's not really what we're talking about here. If we were to give towns the ability to make their own laws on anything, you would see an income tax in Dover, for example. Dover would be able to then institute its own income tax.
Yeah.
We would see
Portsmouth would be able to ban guns.
Exactly. So for all these people saying we want local control, that's not how New Hampshire is set up. And for good reason. We don't want that kind of a scenario. We don't want to have to check our guns when we go across the line into Portsmouth because everybody there decided they're going to ban guns. So all we're doing, we're not changing and saying that towns have to follow everything the state says. We're saying we're going to pull back a little bit of that authority that we gave you because you're mishandling it. It's not like reasonable things that a lot of these town zoning boards were doing. It's a lot of, I live next to this house and I don't want you to change it. I like how it looks now. I don't want you to change it. And rather than paying for it and buying the house next door, you're just going to use government to arbitrarily tell people what they can and can't do with their own property. And so I think a lot of people's feelings on this are just coming from a misunderstanding of how we delegate power to a town in the state. We're not taking away local control. We don't have local control in the state. It's not a thing. We don't want it to be a thing. We want the ultimate form of local control, which is the property owner. We want the property owner to be able to decide what they can do with their own property.
Well, I'll look forward to seeing how this plays out. And I will say, I don't know. Could you give us a very quick overview of some of the substantive changes that took place? Because I did get the impression that it was more mild than a lot of some of the people were making out who were very up in arms against it.
Yes.
What were some of the specifics?
So one of them that I think was talked about quite a bit was in regards to ADUs. So letting people build an ADU on their property, it doesn't have to be attached. So for a lot of people that have, an ailing relative, somebody is getting older and you want them to have their own space, you can build like a little in-law apartment. There are a lot of towns that are like, we can't have this. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to be terrible. You're going to have like 100 people living on one plot of land. We can't have that. That's not at all the scenario and what we're talking about. We had other bills dealing with things like parking. So if you're building an apartment complex saying, you can't require the apartment to have more than one parking spot per unit. There are a lot of places where they're building mostly studio apartments. I can't imagine there are going to be a lot of situations in which these people need 3 or 4 parking spots per unit. And ultimately, that should be up to the business owner, the person building this, to decide how many parking spots their tenants are going to need. If they say that, we have 3 4-bedroom apartments and you get 1 parking spot, people might not want to move there if they can't find parking. So ultimately, we think that the market is going to decide these things, and it shouldn't be up to government to say how many parking spots you need to have or something like that. One bill that we haven't passed yet, But I do think we're going to be able to keep making progress on this next year. Has to do with minimum lot size. There are some towns that have absolutely huge requirements for the number of acres for one lot. So if you go to some of these towns, you'll see like plenty of them having, 5-10 acre minimums. So if you own a plot of land that is 10 acres, let's say, and you go, I don't really need 10 acres. I want to sell half of that off, and I'm going to have my family move in next door. Can't do that. Town doesn't want you to do that.
I've heard from people who bought multiple acres thinking I'll be able to subdivide this later so my kids can live. Like,
Yep.
You can, have kids living nearby, and then the town comes in with zoning after the fact and establishes the minimum lot sizes and basically prohibits them from being able to do with their property what they wanted. So basically a regulatory taking.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they hear this, they think we're just trying to pack as many houses as possible onto one tiny, like, half acre. That's not at all what this legislation is about. This legislation we're only talking about requiring no more than like 1 to 2 acres. I think the latest one that the bill is currently at is 2 acres. That's still a pretty good chunk of land. We're not talking about, skyscrapers being built on a quarter of an acre and all you see from miles around is these like really tight together buildings. But even if somebody did want to do that, one thing that I think people forget all the time is one of the most sought after parts of this state is downtown Portsmouth. People love downtown Portsmouth. And one of the things they really like about it is this compact neighborhood, old school kind of vibe that is a lot of downtown Portsmouth. You see houses that are close together, and they're also fairly close to the road. People love to take pictures of it. Everybody wants to move there. It's some of the most expensive housing in the state. Most towns, pretty much any town, would never let you build that today. So the one thing that everybody says, oh, I love it, if everything could be like this, is the one thing that you're actually zoning out of the entire state.
Yeah. It's amazing to think how many things we respect of accomplishments of the past that are illegal today. Let's hop to maybe this is the last item. This wasn't an accomplishment, but something we aspired to, or I aspired. I've been working on, right to work is probably the right after the Ron Paul campaign, in 2012, right to work was the policy effort I first immediately got involved with. And there is to this day not one single right to work state in New England. There is a pretty strong block from certain special interest groups against that we're working to overturn. It looks fairly promising this year, but I couldn't help but notice that right before the vote on right to work in the New Hampshire House this year, a recent former chairman of the New Hampshire Republican Party came out with a public letter telling Republicans to oppose right to work, and the legislation failed to get the majority needed to pass. Obviously disappointing. For those who don't know, right to work, I guess I just should not assume. Right to work is a law that says you cannot be forced to pay union dues as a condition of employment. It ensures that union dues are voluntary, and ensures that union bosses have to actually work to meet the needs and wants of workers to actually earn their support for the union rather than just taking it for granted. What can you tell us about what happened with right to work this year?
So right to work has been something we've worked on for a very, very, very long time. And we make progress towards it every single year. So it's not one of those issues where you look at it and it's like we haven't moved the needle at all. We're making great progress, but we're still not quite there. And so I think one of the biggest issues is that because we've talked about this issue for so many years, a lot of people have these preconceived notions about what right to work is. And they have this messaging kind of in their mind that right to work is anti-worker or anti-blue collar for the most part. And that's not what it is. So I think the other side has done a really good job of framing this narrative. And it's something that we're just going to have to work on for our side. We're not saying that people can't be part of a union. I think that's ultimately a lot of what it comes down to is people say like, well, the union's really done a lot to help me over the years and I don't want to stab them in the back. We're not saying you can't join the union. We're just saying that people shouldn't be forced to.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be like penalized and told you can't have a job anymore if you don't pay the union.
Right. It makes unions accountable to workers in the same way that school choice makes government schools accountable to families.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
When you have a choice and the purchasing power and you can go elsewhere and withhold that, they suddenly have to care about your wants and needs rather than taking it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
I always go back to those who say that like right to work is anti-union. I mean, you go to right to work states, there are plenty of unions. It's just voluntary and it's more responsive. And you go back to, I always think of Samuel Gompers, one of the heroes of the early labor movement in this early debate in the 20th century of whether unionism should be, coerced and forced or voluntary. And he thought that forced unionism was contrary to everything they stood for as a movement, that if the unions are not demonstrating their value to the people that they are serving, then they do not deserve to have the support of those people. The union should be proactively demonstrating what workers are getting for their union dues, rather than just taking people for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that the free market works. If we tell people that, hey, here are all of your options, you can choose to join and pay them if you want, you don't have to. Of course, we're going to see better results. We're going to see better benefits. So it's always interesting, like when you talk to people that are on the other side of this issue, and for the most part, they're really not willing to listen at all. And so breaking that narrative and telling them that, like, we're not telling you we don't want you to have good benefits. We think this is going to give you better benefits. We think that, they talk about the union's gotten me better pay. They've gotten me more days off. We think you're actually going to do a lot better with that if you were not forced to pay them. If it's an option, they're going to provide a better service. So I think it's ultimately something that we're going to make more progress on again this next year. But we really have to reframe that narrative and that conversation and just get better about, on our side of things, talking about why we support this. We're not an anti-union, anti-worker, perspective inside of things. We really do think that this is going to benefit union workers overall.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate, Sarah, you being willing to go long and extend past our typical. We try to keep it under an hour, but there's so much to cover, so many Liberty wins this year in New Hampshire. Any final words you want to share with folks before we wrap up?
I would just say that we really appreciate all of the hard work of the Liberty activists and legislators over the past year. I know we talked a lot about all of the big wins we had this year. It really couldn't happen truly without the hard work of everybody involved. And it's not something that any one person or any one group could have done on their own. It really required everybody's involvement. So if you are in the state and you're not currently involved, please get involved, whether it's with Americans for Prosperity or any other organization that's also working on these things. We'd love to help you get involved and find out if you're passionate about a certain issue, find the right avenue for you to get involved there. And if you're somebody that's considering running for office next year, you could also be a part of making these changes at the state level. Filing period is going to be coming up next summer, so you've got a little bit of time. Think about it. But if you want to get involved in a bigger way than just being an activist, that's a great opportunity also.
Awesome. I know not everyone who moves to New Hampshire wants to get on the direct political path, and maybe other people want to make differences doing other things, agorism, homeschooling. Those things are wonderful. But if you want to be on make a difference to the direct political path, then AFP is doing great work. The New Hampshire Liberty Alliance is doing great work. And there's so many great ways to plug yourself into those political efforts. So Sarah, thank you for all the work you've been doing over the last 11 years. And we'll try to keep sending more Free Staters your way.
Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Pleasure's on mine. All right, everyone, that's the show. Next week, Bruce Fenton will be our guest. We're going to be talking about the upcoming Free State Bitcoin Digital Asset Conference, which, of course, as a reminder, you can RSVP, register, get your ticket at blockchainnh.com. Be sure to do that. In 11 days, the Granite Freedom Trek is coming up. Just a few tickets left on sale. Act fast. We wanted to keep the group size small so that we can have a more intimate hike. 5 miles, see some beautiful mountains as the leaves are changing. lace up your boots and join us. Granite Freedom Trek. Get your ticket at fsp.org/trek with a K, like Star Trek, but it's the Granite Freedom Trek. fsp.org/trek. Thank you, of course, to all of our patrons supporting everything we do year-round in our mission to bring more free staters to New Hampshire to achieve liberty in our lifetime. So our patrons, as I mentioned, are actively supporting programs like these and our outreach programs. I'm getting ready to head with some volunteers to the Holton, Maine gun show this weekend to do some more outreach. We've got, through our outreach efforts in Maine alone, we've got more in the last few weeks. We got more than 100 new signups of new people signing up for our newsletter and wanting to be informed about events that are happening in New Hampshire. That's 100 potential new movers to the Free State from Mainers who are getting increasingly dispirited about the direction of the Pine Tree State. So we're doing more outreach. If you'd like to help support our programs, become a patron, fsp.org/give, $10 a month, $100 a year, whichever you prefer. It makes a big difference, and I appreciate our 200 plus patrons. I'd like to get to 300 by the end of the year. Can I count you in? fsp.org/give, and you'll see all the benefits you get for patron membership there. It's not like getting like an NPR tote bag or something. Really, really nice perks for our patrons as our way of saying thank you. I want to, of course, also say thank you to our producer for the show, Renita, for operating everything behind the scenes, making us look so good. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.